So that's why Vivekananda, at the World Religion Parliament, he was kind of the westernized version that they could swallow and present it in a way that the West could kind of handle the polyamorous relationships with many thousands of deities.
Well, Vivekananda is a very interesting example. This is sort of a side note to the line that I'm developing, but since you mentioned him. Vivekananda was two things at the same time. He was really a great irony. On one hand, he was one of India's greatest ever patriots. He realized that Western culture, and especially Christianity, was how to put it, really destroying Indian culture. And the reason that this was happening, that he gave, was because India wasn't unified, that there wasn't a sort of a central religion to oppose the Christianity, that in fact what was called and what we learn to call Hinduism is actually a diversity of hundreds, if not thousands, of local situations, some larger than the others, but a tremendous diversity of thought and action and ritual and philosophy. So he felt that by trying to come up with some common threads and by unifying many of these diverse elements, that he could make, that India could make a stand, that Indian culture could resist the encroachment of British colonial culture and Christianity and Western culture in general. And I think that this was a very astute and brave move for Vivekananda to do at that time. However, on the other side of things, this was probably the most destructive thing ever to happen to Indian culture, much more destructive than any of the various invasions, Islamic invasions and so forth that took place over 1,200, 1,300 years. It was this attempt to save Indian culture that obscured some of the greatness and great details of Indian culture, trying to create a universal world religion, basically an ideology out of a massive system of knowledge. So,
sort of like John Calvin.
Like John Calvin?
Sure, he systematized the Christian religion.
And why did he do that?
I suppose in order to provide a standard against which thought and behavior could be measured and found wanting.
Yeah, well, I would say there's a big difference there, in that that I don't know if Vivekananda would have felt the call to do that, was he not wearing the patriot's hat, as it were. In other words, that I think that he did that as a political act towards the nation, rather than a religious or a philosophical or an ideological act for the benefit of the culture. If you see the difference that I'm making there.
Help me see it.
Huh?
Help me see it, Babaji.
Help you see it?
Yeah.
Well, I'm saying that Vivekananda was political in that sense. And in the
So what did it do? Did it provide a
well, I think that he certainly stimulated.
Did it, in other words, elevate the reputation of India in the world community?
Yes, of course it did. It elevated the position of India in the world community by a little bit, not a whole lot, but by a little bit. But that was one of his goals. But you see, the basic goal was to unify Indians and to get people who had a wide diversity of thoughts and practices and so forth, for them to come together on some common strands that that didn't even represent most of the Indians. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. Here we have the category of religion established as having a deity, a central deity, which is very simple in the case of the monotheistic religions. You have Christianity with Jesus being the deity. You have the Christianity as the doctrine as known in the printed and published text, the Bible. You have a similar Western appreciation of Islam in the same way as having Allah as the deity and the Quran as the text and the teachings of the Quran as the doctrine. Now, in India, this was considerably more difficult because really you have 800 languages, 800 separate languages in India. You have so many different cultures within the subcontinent, so many different philosophies. You have so many different castes and jatis and so forth, that there really was very few meeting points at all. So what was established as meeting points were things like Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta is something that if you took the population of so-called Hindus and you looked at what percentage of the population, especially at that time, even heard of Advaita Vedanta, it would probably be less than 1%. Mm-hmm. You take something like the Bhagavad Gita, which became assigned as the basic text of Hinduism. And the Bhagavad Gita also, especially at that time, was a text that was probably known by less than 1% of the people. And as you might read the Hinduism of Vivekananda, which is fairly consistent with the Hinduism of a number of the academics, Orientalists of the time, and you try to apply that religion to your average Hindu, you couldn't. It didn't fit. It didn't fit at all, didn't even come close. That there is only a very small elite of so-called Hindus that really could be accurately described by Vivekananda's attempt to make a world religion to universalize the teachings of Hinduism.
Babaji?
Yeah.
Also, when you were saying that Vivekananda is he was making a political statement, if he unified India on some level politically, then they could actually shift colonialization. They could kind of reestablish their own independence. Is that what you're kind of
That's
pointing
exactly
towards?
what I'm saying. That's the politics that Vivekananda was interested in was maintaining, was getting rid of the colonial influence on first on the culture, and then ultimately the political aspect of the colonization of India. So, I mean, I'm saying that his purposes, his intentions were, I think, were very, very good and very, very strong. The results, however, leave some questions.